Amnesty International has been concerned and has worked, has lobbied the South Korean, called upon the South Korean government on many occasions over the last more than 3 decades. We've been expressing serious concern on the use of the vaguely worded clauses of the national security law, mostly to curb or control the freedom of thought of groups or individuals who express opinions which are different to those which are officially seen as policy by the government. And so we have called upon the South Korean government to either abolish the national security law or to amend it in line with international standards that South Korea as a state or is a state party to. Until 2008, for more than a decade, there has been a declining trend in the use of the national security law and in the arrests made under the national security law. However, worryingly, since 2008, we've seen a trend not only in the number of increase in the number of initial arrests, but also in the number of cases which have been taken up and also the detentions that have gone ahead. Having said that, the courts in South Korea have thrown out many of these cases. So if you look at the number of initial arrests, I think something like 109% of the cases that were where individuals initially arrested by the police, they were rejected by the court. They were not transferred by the police to the prosecution, mostly because of lack of evidence. And this has increased. In 2008, for instance, it was 51%. Sorry, it was 8%, and then it went up to 51% in 2009, and now it's in last year, 2010, up to October, it was 109%. And these are statistics from the National Police Agency. At the other level, also nearly 40% of the cases that the police and prosecution have taken up and which have gone to court, the courts have found them have either acquitted or thrown the cases out. So we feel that keeping all this in mind, there has been an increasing use of the national security law. Many of these cases have been thrown out, but because they're still being used arbitrarily, so it has had a chilling effect on the freedom of thought and the freedom of expression and freedom of association, especially of those people who are perceived by the state to be in opposition to the official line. In some cases also, increasingly, the government has also been using the national security law on the internet. And some of these cases could be termed as absurd. But the case which really got me interested was the arrest of Professor Ose Chol of the Socialist Workers League in 2008. Partly because I was on sabbatical at that time, and he was from the same university where I was based. And so that really got me interested. And then the more I looked into it, I found that the Socialist Workers League was not an organization which was a threat to the security of South Korea. In fact, the Socialist Workers League actually was criticizing even North Korea because they felt that they were not a pure socialist state and they were exploiting labor. So, in a sense, he and his organization were being punished because they were espousing or supporting a socialist ideology. But again, they were using it peacefully, and they were engaged in, of course, the candlelight vigil against the beef imports in 2008. And after that, of course, as we continued our research, we found, interestingly, increasing number of cases. One was an online book case, bookstore case. Another where, again, the charges were very absurd. And then again, there was another case where there were increasing number of cases of internet use of the internet. So we found that there has been an attempt made by the present administration to control the freedom of thought and association. To begin with, Amnesty International does acknowledge that the South Korean government has a right to protect the security of its citizens and its nationals. And yes, there is a genuine threat in its security from its neighboring countries. And so South Korea does need a law or a set of laws to protect the security of its people. But the present national security law does not really guarantee, does not protect the South Korean state from its enemies. In fact, it's been used increasingly amongst its own nationals, who are, most of whom have been arrested or detained, and human rights violations perpetrated on them just for peacefully raising criticisms or being seen as anti-state organizations, but in many cases they've not been proved to be right. And so in that sense, and as we are showing in this briefing, and as we have also highlighted when we have taken up many of the cases in the past, when we look at the national security law and its implementation, we find hundreds of people have been executed. Of course, the last execution was in 1986 under the national security law. But at the other level, thousands of people were tortured. And so it has a very painful memory in the evolution of the democratic process in South Korea. And so we also join the UN Human Rights Committee, the UN Human Rights Council, and the Special Rapporteur on the Freedom of Expression, Frank LaRue, in their recommendation to abolish vaguely worded clauses such as Article 7, and or to amend the law in line with international standards like the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights that South Korea is a state party to, and also to that South Korea respects its own commitment that it would be using this law very, very carefully, which in practice it has not. So when the national security law in South Korea, again, the national security law in South Korea came up in December 1948, a long time ago. And so when we see now, South Korea has changed a lot. And so keeping that in mind, we need a law which not only keeps up in times, but also ensures that human rights of its citizens, of the people who live in South Korea, are respected, are upheld.